All right. All right, hello, and welcome to today's video where I'm going to be talking about exploring the question of why consensus reality is so harsh and why humanity is so harsh. Because I feel like as empaths and as sensitive people and as people who are generally wanting to make the world a better place, and people who have experienced a lot of pain and suffering and abuse and trauma throughout our lives because of the way that society is set up, because of how our caregivers treated us, because of how religion treated us, because of how government treated us, because of how the education system treated us, there can be a lot, like I say, of pain and suffering around having been human growing up in our current societies and in our families, in our institutions, in the ways that the world is run right now. And for a lot of us, we want to know why the suffering that we went through happened. And I feel like this is just such a normal human impulse. We want to understand our suffering. We want to understand why we went through the pain that we went through. We want to understand why we were hurt the way we were hurt. We want to understand the reason why life has been so painful. And I feel like, of course, that makes perfect sense, right? Because as intelligent beings, we have the desire to understand and the desire to know what is hurting us and what is harming us, because there's an understanding, an instinct, an understanding, belief, all of these things kind of coexisting all at once, that the better we understand something, the better we understand a threat, the better we understand whatever it is that's harming us, the more we can protect ourselves from it. And I think that at the base of our beings, of course, right, we all want to be happy, and we all want to have pleasure, and we all want to feel good. We all want to be able to grow. We all want to be able to expand into our true selves. And when we experience pain and when we experience suffering, like I say, there's always going to be an instinct there to understand why that pain and that suffering is happening. We are always going to want to understand the roots of our pain in order, like I say, in an attempt to protect ourselves from future pain. Because again, there's the simultaneous understanding / belief, because sometimes it's an understanding, sometimes it is absolutely true that the more we can understand why something is painful and why something is hurting us, the more we can protect ourselves from it. And sometimes it's a belief. Sometimes we can totally and completely understand why things are the way that they are. We can have a complete picture of how things are happening, and we still don't have the capacity to actually protect ourselves from harm. So, but like I say, if there is a chance that we are going to be able to protect ourselves from harm, it's usually going to come from understanding why that harm was occurring. Yes? So, like I say, it's completely normal and completely natural and completely intelligent to want to understand our pain, to want to understand why we are suffering, to want to understand why we are hurting, to want to understand why people are hurting us, to understand the roots of our pain and the roots of our suffering, so that we can try to protect ourselves, so that we can try to make things different. And then beyond that, right, like beyond just the instinct to protect ourselves and to nourish and nurture ourselves, a lot of us want to make this world a better place for other people too, right? A lot of us as empaths, or people who just genuinely have a desire to see this world be a better place, a safer place, a less painful place, not only for ourselves but for everyone else. We want to understand the pain of the world. We want to understand why the systems that we're in are so painful, because we want to change them. We want to change them for ourselves, and we want to change them for everybody else. We want to see this world be a safer place for everybody. And so this question of like, why is humanity so horrible? Why is consensus reality so harsh? Why are we operating in these systems? Why have we created these systems that seem to cause so much pain? Why did we create them if they cause so much pain? And what are we going to do to fix it is the big question always, right? And so now, before I get too deep into this, I want to express that I do not personally believe that humanity is evil, or that evil exists in the sense that there is inherent just something about a human or a group of humans or anything in nature that is inherently just negative, irredeemable, or like I say, that its fundamental nature is evil, its fundamental nature is harmful, its fundamental nature is bad and wrong in the sense that it shouldn't be there, okay? And if you do believe in evil, if you do believe that there are just things that are inherently bad, inherently wrong, inherently harmful, inherently, like I say, evil, I am not here to try to convince you otherwise, because I know that a lot of us have had experiences and have been through things and have felt things and have had experiences where we were on the receiving end of something so incredibly traumatizing or painful or annihilating in a way that the only way we can make sense of it is that the person or the institution or the whatever it is that caused us harm is just inherently horrible or inherently harmful or inherently bad. And in that, I also want to validate that can be a very important step along the healing journey when we are trying to heal or integrate or evolve from a trauma and from being very, very harmed. Because like I say in lots of my other videos, right, there's an instinct that when we're being harmed and when we're being hurt and when we're in pain, to blame ourselves and to look for what it is that I did to cause this, and to look for how I am perpetuating the harm or how I'm inviting the harm in some way, or how it is somehow our own fault. And that too, I believe, is an innocent attempt at trying to figure out how to save ourselves from it, right? Because if we are somehow the cause of the pain that we're in, if we can figure out why the pain is happening in the context of what we are doing to cause the pain, or what we are doing to invite the pain, or what we are doing that's creating the pain, that gives us the power, that makes us feel like we would have the power to change it, to save ourselves, to get rid of that pain. So the internal instinct to blame ourselves and to have guilt and shame and to believe that we are the ones causing our own pain and causing our own suffering is, like I say, one that I believe is innocent, and one that is not necessarily telling us that this is true, right? It's not always true that the pain that we're causing that has anything to do with us, that the pain that we're in has anything to do with us. It's not always true that the pain that we suffered in our past, or that the pain that we're currently experiencing, is something within our control, is something because of us. But, like I say, the childhood instinct to blame everything on ourselves and to make everything about ourselves, because again, the one thing we had control over as children was our own behavior. So to believe that everything is because of us in some way can be, in a certain context, an empowering belief. And we see this a lot in New Age spirituality, where we're constantly being told that everything is a reflection of us and the whole universe is just reflecting everything back to you, and if you're experiencing something negative, you just need to change your vibration or change yourself or change something about you in order to make that thing go away, because everything's just a reflection of you. And my belief is that that's a massive oversimplification of reality, and that mirrors our childhood understanding of the world, right? That in our childhood understanding, everything was just a reflection of us. Our caregivers were doing what they were doing because of us, or not doing what they weren't doing because of us. Like, we had no concept of other people being other people doing what they were doing because of themselves, and us just being collateral damage, us just being in the way of it. And I think that a lot of us brought that belief and brought that understanding into our adulthoods, that everything is happening to me because of me, people are reacting to me because of me. And part of maturation, part of our emotional maturation, part of our mental maturation is to start to understand that not everything is about us. Not everything is because of you. Not everything is because of anything you're doing or not doing. Sometimes, like I say, we are collateral damage to other people's stuff. Sometimes we are being hurt, or we were just in the way, or whatever, someone is treating us a certain way, and it literally wouldn't matter if we changed how we felt inside, or if we valued ourselves more, or if we stood up for ourselves in some way. That person is going to continue to be harmful and traumatizing and all of these things, and there's not necessarily anything that we can do about it other than trying to remove ourselves from the situation or whatever. And so, like I say, coming through this place of believing in evil and believing that there is something just inherently bad about the people or the systems that harmed us can be a step in that maturation process, where we're no longer blaming ourselves. We're no longer saying, what did I do to cause this? Why did this happen to me specifically? Why were they doing this to me? What was I doing? How did I attract it? How did I create it? What was it about me that made it so that they wanted to victimize me? And we can go through a different kind of, like I say, a very important phase where we just start to say, no, it's them. They were evil, they were wrong, they were bad, and it had nothing to do with me, and I was good and I was innocent, and they were putting their evil on me. And sometimes, like I say, I think that can be a very important phase to go through, and that we need to honor that. And so, like, if we are seeing our perpetrators and the people that hurt us and the people that and the institutions and the systems that harmed us as evil, sometimes we need to let ourselves go through that. And so that's why I'm saying, I'm not here to tell you that evil doesn't exist. I'm not here to convince you that there aren't evil people and that there aren't evil institutions. If that's something that feels relieving for you right now, and if that's something that feels good for you right now, I want you to hold on to that. And if that's something that helps you not feel like you are to blame for being in pain or for any of the harm that may have been caused to you, hold on to that and let it be something that you are, like I say, freeing yourself from the idea that every terrible thing that happened to you was because of you, or that you deserved it in some way, or that you caused it in some way, or that there was something you could have done to make it different, because that's not always true. And like I say, sometimes in order to get there, we have to see the people that perpetuated harm onto us as evil. And so I think if we look kind of individually but also collectively, like right now we still see a lot of people and a lot of groups and a lot of institutions as fundamentally evil. We are looking at those who are causing large amounts of harm, or who have historically caused large amounts of harm, and we are saying these groups of people are just evil. These groups of people are just fundamentally evil. And even like in the conspiratorial world of like believing that they're like literal reptilian beings who are just fundamentally evil, here to prey on the human species, that are like destroying the human species and have taken over and all these things, I think it makes sense that we would think that. Because again, when we look at something so painful, and we look at something so harmful, and we look at institutions, we look at people, we look at situations that are causing mass destruction and mass pain, and have for a very, 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 very long time, of course we want to look at that and be like, just like, what's wrong with that? Like, what's wrong with those people? What's wrong with the way that they are? And I believe that there's an instinct to want to separate ourselves. Like, we want to say, like, there's evil and there's wrong and there's bad and there's those kind of people, and I'm not like that. I'm not one of those people. And kind of the instinct to be repulsed by something that is so harmful again, I think that makes a lot of sense just based on the fact that we are life and we are alive and we want to stay alive. Like, we have the same instinct to anything, like diseases we don't understand, and anything that causes death that we feel like we can't prevent death, and death itself, we fear it and we want to separate ourselves from it, and we see it as evil or dark or twisted, or we just don't want to go there, because we want to stay alive and because we want to be have pleasure. So of course, like I say, we want to separate ourselves from these experiences. We want to separate ourselves from these beings. We want to separate ourselves from these people and institutions and all of these things that are causing all this harm, for a very good reason. We don't want to identify as being anything like that. We don't want to identify that we could be like that if we had gone through what they had gone through. We don't want to believe that there's something like that in us. And like I say, we don't want to be connected to it. We don't want to feel like that's part of our humanity, because we want to feel like our humanity is good and our humanity is gentle and our humanity is fundamentally something good. And so, like I say, it can be very instinctual to label things as evil and to label groups of people as evil and to label groups of people as just bad and inherently bad and flawed. And then on top of that, especially if you're raised in any Western religion, where in a lot of Western religions, the fundamental understanding is that we are inherently sinful, that we are inherently fallen, that we are inherently wrong, bad, and broken, separated from that which is good, and that we need to spend the rest of our lives trying to fix whatever it is about us that makes us so evil and fallen and sinful and not good, our lower nature, and then that we have to spend the rest of our lives trying to fix that and be redeemed by something and fighting against those instincts and those parts of ourselves. And we're told over and over and over again that we have to fight these evil, bad, wrong parts of ourselves. And so much of our culture also has made evil. We have been trained to believe that parts of us, like our sexuality, or some of the ways that we express creatively, or some of the ways that we live just as natural human beings, is inherently evil. And so we have parts of ourselves that do cause objective harm, that we're being told are wrong, bad, and evil, and we have to fight against these parts of ourselves, and they hurt us and they hurt others. And again, there's that childhood, we want to blame ourselves, we want to believe there's something wrong with us, we may even want to believe there are evil parts of ourselves so that we can feel like we can separate ourselves from them. Again, we want to dissociate from whatever it is that's causing pain, that's taking away pleasure. And so to even hold the belief or the idea that there's something evil within us can be sort of like a relief, in the sense of like, but so that's not me. Like, I can kind of dissociate from it, I can disidentify from it, I can put that part of me in a box, I can do the therapy or the whatever it is that I need to do to get rid of that part of myself, or to burn it up, or to subdue it in some way, or I can be saved in some way by something, some God, some spirituality, some practice that will rescue me from this evil part of myself. And so, like, we're told over and over and over again that we have these evil parts and we have these wrong and bad and broken parts, and that is why we are that way. Okay? And this has been humanity's explanation for why we are so harmful and why we are so harsh and why we are in so much pain forever. Right? Like, from almost the beginning of humanity, we've been blaming ourselves for our pain. And like, if we go all the way back to like tribal beings that started to develop superstition around nature, around the things that they needed in order to survive in their interactions with just reality itself and their interactions with nature, there started to become these beliefs that we were being blessed, or that we were being punished for our actions via nature giving us a flood or giving us a good harvest. And again, there was this childlike projection of the self onto the universe, onto nature, onto what we were experiencing, that any pain we were experiencing, any, like I say, the drought, the disease, the famine, the flood, the storm, the whatever it is that was robbing us of our opportunity to live a happy, abundant life, was our fault in some way. And it was because we were inherently sinful, we were inherently bad, we were inherently wrong, and that we were being punished. We were being punished for our misgivings, and that also it was our job to learn what nature wanted and to learn what nature expected from us so that we could behave accordingly, so that we could find the good parts of ourselves. And then we found dominance eventually. We found human beings started to understand that we could get things done in society, and we could get things done in groups, and that was great. But if one of us was stronger, or one of us was more just capable in some way of surviving or hoarding the resources or manipulating people in some way, we started to learn that dominance equaled more resources. Dominance equaled having more control and more power, and that meant better chances of survival. That meant better chance of spreading your seed. That meant a better chance of having pleasure. And therefore, we started to develop these systems of dominance and of exploitation and of being on top of one another, and creating systems where those at the top benefited and those at the bottom sacrificed for those at the top. And this was, again, a natural development from the desire to survive, okay? And now, again, the biggest and most important thing that I think we need to understand when if we really want to understand why humanity is so harsh, and why consensus reality is so exploitative and so harmful, and why humans are the way that they are, why we are so traumatized and we pass that trauma on to one another. My theory of it, and again, you're free to disagree with me, you might believe that there's just inherent evil, you might have other theories for why consensus reality is so horrible, but my working theory of why consensus reality is so harsh, and why humans are so harsh, and why we have developed all these systems that are so painful, is fundamentally because surviving in nature for all of human history was incredibly hard and harsh. This is something that I think that as people who are living in more and more westernized or developed countries, we have lost and we are losing our connection to nature. And that's being said over and over and over again, like that. We're disconnected from nature. We're disconnected from the cycles and the rhythms of nature and all of these things. And this is framed in a negative way a lot of the time, right? Like us being disconnected from nature is a bad thing, and that we need to reconnect to nature. And of course, I think that that's true. Like, we can absolutely stand to be far more connected to nature and connected to nature in an intelligent way, where we allow it to inform us, and we develop our systems around the natural cycles of nature and all of these things. This is great. But on the other side, okay, on the flip side of that, on the positive side of that, we are also quite disconnected from how incredibly traumatizing nature is, and how hard it has been for all of humanity to survive without the technologies that we now have that separate us from nature. Okay? So just take a second to think about that for a moment. That our current state and our current place in humanity, that our current place in the evolution of our species, is that we are quite disconnected from nature. And in a lot of ways, that is why we have access to so much pleasure. That is why we have access to living into our 60s and 70s and 80s and 90s. That is why so many of us don't die of infectious disease, that don't die from genetic problems. This is us being disconnected from nature is a huge part of the reason most of us are still alive here today, right? Like, if we weren't as disconnected from nature today as we are, I do not think I would be alive right now. So much of what has kept me alive as being a super highly sensitive, autistic, tons of problems with my body from the very beginning of my life, right? Born in Canada. If I had been born pretty much in any other century, I probably wouldn't have survived my childhood. If we had been closer to nature, right? I was so vulnerable, and my body was so weak, and my mind was so weak, I probably wouldn't have survived. And we still have many groups of people on this planet, yes, that are currently living much closer to nature than we do. And we look at them and we're like, why are they having 8 or 10, 15 children when they don't have enough money to feed themselves? Why are they all whatever? Well, yeah, right? Because they're living a completely different existence than most of us. Like, I know a lot of the time the new age people say that there's like the splitting of the worlds and there's like the 2 timelines and all this stuff. And part of me looks at that and says, like, yeah, like there's the timeline currently happening on the planet of people who are in these westernized developed countries where we have access to medicine, to sanitation, to structures of infrastructure that literally separate us from nature, that have access to, because again, think about it, like, you probably eat the same fruits and vegetables all year round. You can go to the grocery store and get broccoli in November, and you can get it in September, and you can get it in July, and you can get it in December, and it's like the same broccoli. And at the same time, you can also get bananas, you can also get blueberries, you can also get oranges. That is unheard of, right? Like, that in and of itself, we are separated from nature, and the reason you have access to fruits and vegetables all year round is because we are separated from nature. The reason you have access to an antibiotic if you need it is because we are separated from nature. The reason that you don't worry if you're going to make it through the night, every single night, is because you live in a house with heating and insulation and security, and you are separated from nature. You see, the fact that we have engineered ourselves out of the food chain, the fact that we have engineered ourselves out of the food chain, the fact that we have engineered ourselves out of the natural rhythms of the earth is not 100% a bad thing. It's incredibly amazing that we have done that. And it is the reason we are the most successful species on the planet, is because we have learned to overcome nature in a multitude of ways so that it is no longer threatening to us. And so my point that I'm trying to make with this is that why humanity is so harsh and why humanity has developed all of these ways of consensus reality that are exploitative and harmful and cause harm to ourselves and others is because our history of being connected to nature, our history of being vulnerable to nature, our history of being vulnerable to the elements, to animals, to one another, has been incredibly traumatizing. We did not show up as human beings in a westernized world with all of this access and all of these resources and everything existing the way that it is, and then just decide from there that we're going to be unequal in our distribution, that we're going to be exploitative, that we're going to harm large groups of people in order to help others, that we're going to rape the earth. That didn't happen in a vacuum. We didn't just appear with all the technology that we currently have and all the understanding that we currently have and decide to be horrible. Now, this is not a justification. This is not saying that how we are doesn't need to change, not at all. Because what we are doing is very harmful. What we are doing is very traumatizing. We are passing trauma on from generation to generation to generation. We are going to destroy ourselves if we keep going the way that we are. And the harm that our systems cause to one another is very real and very not okay, in the sense that we are intelligent beings who now, at this point in human history, have enough information, have enough technology, have enough experience that we can do something different. And that is why I make these videos. That is why we have social justice warriors. That's why we have anti-racism teachers. That's why we have decolonial work. That's why we have environmentalists. This is why we have people all over the planet who are saying, hey, wait, no, we gotta stop. This is why we're getting trauma informed. This is why we have people who are saying, like, we can't keep going like this. Like, the systems that we have are destroying us. And that is true. That is completely true. And I am not trying to make that go away. And I'm not trying to justify how we are as being good and fine because we have a good reason for being here. But I am saying we have a good reason for being here. It is completely explainable why we are this way. And it is explainable in the sense that it is not because we are evil, and it's not because we are inherently awful, and it's not even, I don't believe that it's because we inherently enjoy hurting one another. I don't think that that's where it's coming from. It's that forever, survival was incredibly difficult. Being in our one-to-one relationship with nature, in our one-to-one relationship with reality, it was so harsh. So harsh. Like, to think, right? Like, and I empathize and I get it. The idea of going out into nature being healing and being soothing and being all these things. Okay, totally. I'm not trying to take that away from anyone. And, so not but and, if we are honest about what it is like in nature, nature is incredibly freaking hardcore. Like, I don't know if any of you have ever watched Planet Earth or the Discovery Channel to watch how animals treat each other. like the predator-prey situation. It's pretty ruthless and hostile. And even the idea of things existing in nature that are parasitic, that literally exist, and the way that they survive is by destroying other things, right? Parasites that literally live via sucking the nutrients from its host to the point where it makes the host sick and then the host dies. That is nature. That is incredibly exploitative and manipulative, and that is part of the natural world. It's very painful and it's destructive, and it's inherently that way. The cancer cell is literally inherently a part of nature that divides and divides and divides and it divides, eventually, like, to try to take over, right? It literally cares only about itself, if we want to, like, personify it. The cancer cell divides and divides and divides, caring only about itself, destroying all the cells around it, until, again, eventually it destroys itself through destroying its own host. That's nature. That's real reality. That's reality. Yes? Cordyceps that slowly take over the mind of an ant, forcing it to go towards the sunlight, and then eventually destroying the ant's entire body so that it can live. That is nature. That is natural. That's natural. This one-to-one relationship with nature, this one-to-one relationship with reality that does not care about us, in the sense that we can really look at nature and reality as being incredibly neutral, right? If a little baby who does not have the cognitive capacity to understand how fire works puts their hand in a fire, reality, nature doesn't say, well, the baby couldn't know that, right? The baby couldn't possibly understand that they were going to burn themselves and it was going to cause massive damage to their hand by putting their hand in the fire. So we're not going to punish the baby by burning the baby. That's not what nature does. right? If a baby puts its hand in the fire, a baby who has no capacity to understand that that's going to hurt itself, it gets hurt. If a baby crawls to the edge of a cliff and falls over, reality doesn't say that that baby couldn't have known we're gonna defy the laws of physics and the baby's not gonna fall. That's not what happens. We all reap the same consequences, whether we're capable of understanding them or not. Reality doesn't change for any of us. Nature doesn't change for any of us. We can be born with genetic mutations that make it so that we are going to be sick and in pain for the rest of our lives. We can be born with mental development that means that we are never going to be able to be self-sufficient. We're never going to be able to be what society deems worthy or good enough. And if we weren't also born into a family that had the resources and the understanding and the desire to take care of us, that's it. Right? Like, nature is not going to take care of you, kind of thing. So, and like I say, from forever, being a human was incredibly difficult. Surviving on our planet is not easy, and has not been easy for humanity, for all of humanity. We were vulnerable to famine. We were vulnerable to disease. We were vulnerable to floods. We were vulnerable to storms. We were vulnerable to literally a different microbiome of a neighboring tribe coming and visiting with us. And they could bring a pathogen that none of us had ever known before and wipe all of us out. We could be living fine, everything's great. One storm comes, takes out all the food, the whole village dies. Like, we need to understand where we came from. Why is humanity so traumatized? Because being alive has been incredibly traumatizing. Being a human has been incredibly traumatizing. Why have we come up with all of these stories and these religions and these ideas and all of this stuff? Gods, things that are going to save us, things that are going to create the heaven, things that are going to take us out of this, because we had nothing else. Like, especially for the centuries and centuries where we didn't have technology and we didn't have understanding of ourselves, we didn't understand human psychology, we didn't understand human biology, right? Disease, famine, all of these things, we were just completely vulnerable to them. Of course we made up stories that if we just behaved properly and if we just did these things and not these things and made up all these rules about what our behavior was causing the universe to respond to us by, like, of course we came up with that stuff. Because the other alternative was, there's nothing we can do because we don't understand it. There's literally nothing we can do because we don't understand it. We came up with so many of these rules and these systems and these structures, and that this is what's good behavior, this is what's bad behavior, this is what success is, this is what is evil, this is what is right, this is what is wrong. Purely based on, we're just trying to figure out what is making the universe either bless us or curse us so that we can try to position ourselves to be more blessed than cursed. In these situations where, again, we didn't understand. We didn't have the technology to take us out of it. We couldn't, right? Like, nowadays, there's fewer and fewer and fewer people becoming religious as more and more and more people become scientifically minded. The more we start to just, and like, not in the sense that like science is proving that God doesn't exist. It's creating less and less of a need to believe in a God, purely because we feel more and more empowered and more like we can understand how things work, and therefore life isn't so mysterious, and we don't feel so vulnerable, and then we don't have so much of a need for that story of the dad in the sky who's going to save us or curse us or bless us if we live the way that gives us approval from this thing. You see what I'm saying? And so, again, if we really want to understand why we are the way we are, why we have developed the systems that we've developed, it's because essentially the path that humanity has taken, it's been that those who were willing to dominate, those who were willing to exploit, those who were willing to take more for themselves through the exploitation of others were the ones who survived the best. They are the ones who had the most success, the most access to resources, the most capacity to create for themselves a life where they got to have pleasure. And when we didn't do that, now this is a little bit tricky, okay? But when we didn't do that, either we functioned as a community, we functioned as a tribe, we functioned as, because there have been absolutely civilizations, groups of people who were not violent, who worked together, who worked with nature, who worked in cooperation, and were very successful. And if those tribes were existing currently, it is very likely that they would be just as successful or more successful than our current paradigm. Okay? It's very possible that if we were to take one of those cultures that were non-exploitative, that were community-based and all of these things, and we were to implant them now with all the technology and understanding and resources that we have now, they would be an incredibly successful species. They would be an incredibly successful group of people. And I believe, again, that that's essentially what we're trying to work towards now. Like when we say we want peace and when we say we want a new world and a new earth and new systems, where this is what we're saying. It's like we want to go towards being non-violent. We want to go towards understanding that the more we work together and the more we are in community and the more we take care of each other, we actually have more success, not less success. Okay, so I believe that that is true, and I believe that that is what we are trying to work towards. And on the flip side, part of how we got here. So again, please don't hear me saying the only way we could have gotten here is through exploitation, because I don't know that that's true. I have no idea. We have no idea, right? If we had been a non-violent humanity, if we had been cooperative through the whole thing, if we had been able to face the scarcity and the trauma and the like I say, just the incredible difficulty of surviving all throughout human history, and if we had been able to look at that and not go into our lower nature, if you want to call it that, not go into that kind of survival mode that makes us just go like a wounded animal, which is sort of how humanity has been behaving, right? Like I really look at humanity and our systems not as intelligent. Like, and I know, like, a lot of people see the people who are at the top of our systems and the people who are perpetuating these systems of abuse and exploitation and all these things, and we see evil mastermind. I don't see evil mastermind. I see person who is in a deep state of fear, person who is in a deep state of trauma, who is acting from that base level human function of just like the wounded animal. I don't see higher level intelligence. I see wounded animal just doing whatever needs to be done in the moment to overpower and to overtake, because that's what humanity essentially believes in our nervous systems is what is required to survive. That's what I see. I see a humanity that has been traumatized from nature, from other tribes, from ourselves, all through human history, who have been clamoring at this idea of dominance and suppression and exploitation in order to just keep our heads above water. Okay? I don't see a highly intelligent system of reptilian beings who are have this whole big grand plan to destroy humanity. I mostly see people who are just grasping at straws every single day to keep themselves in a situation of dominance, because that's the current paradigm of what success is. So now, I am not saying that I know either way, if humanity would have developed so much technology and so much awareness and so had been able to harness and harvest enough resources to become as separated from nature as we have become in order to develop the understanding and technologies that we have developed in order to be as successful as we are, had we not gone through that dominance phase. I don't know. I'm not saying either way because I don't know. If we had been in a state of cooperation, I don't know if we would have been able to harness enough resources without that exploitative labor in order to create the abundance that we created that led to so many of the technological advances we've created. Maybe we could have, and maybe it would have been better. Like, I literally have no idea. But this is how we got here, right? We exploited our way to all of this technology that has made the life that most of us are living so livable. Like, and I think this is part of the reason why the anti-racism and the decolonial teachers are saying, like, we are benefiting from the history of exploitation and dominance and harm that our culture was based upon, because that is how we collected all the resources we collected. That is how we got ourselves so far out of the food chain, is by certain small groups of the population exploiting large groups of the population to create so much resource, so much abundance of resource that was then used to create technologies and study and all of these things that took us out of the food chain so much that we now have these systems that were built on all of that stuff. Because that is true. That is how we built this. We built it on exploitation. And so if we hadn't exploited that way, I don't know that people would willingly have worked that hard and sacrificed themselves like that much to get as much resource as we have. And I don't know if, had we not done that, if we would have been able to get here. So it's I don't know. I don't have the answer to that question. And maybe it would have been something that just took us longer, and we would have just gotten there slower. And maybe it would have been, like I say, better. Maybe we would have gotten there in a much better way. But what we do know, again, is now. Now we have the understanding. Now we have the resources and the awareness and all of this stuff. We have the results of all of that chaos being, we have all this technology, we have all this understanding, we have all, like, the reason we can even understand the traumas that we have been through, because we have people who study them in university, is because of the system. Like, the system created the capacity for us to understand why the system is harming us. You see what I'm saying here? Does that make sense? So if we want to start to say, okay, we need to create something new, we need to do something different, I'm all for that. And obviously I'm all for that. I don't think that this system of exploitation and dominance is the best thing. It simply isn't. We are high enough understanding, we are high enough technology, we are high enough in our consciousness as a humanity, as a collective, to understand that there is a better way. And there are ancient cultures and indigenous cultures that have understood this forever and have been living that way forever. And even if we look at, like, places like the blue zones, right, where people are living these long, healthy, happy lives, we need to understand that a big part of why that's happening, a big part of why those areas are the way that they are, the thing that they all have in common, right? Like the Blue Zone diet book and all these things want to sell us that it's something in their diet or something in their the soil or some magical nutrient that they all are getting, and it's not anything to do with that. The main reason the people in the blue zones are so successful is because they live in isolated communities where everyone is considered a part of the group, so everyone takes care of one another, that are highly resourced. They don't have threat of insecurity because they are living in naturally highly dense resourced places. All of the blue zones, okay, all of the blue zones have high natural resource. They are isolated from other communities, and therefore they live as a community because they recognize everyone as part of the self. They don't have scarcity, and they don't have other. That is why they are so successful. And so why, again, is humanity so hard and harsh? Because we have been through centuries of scarcity, of not enough in literal, real reality, of disease and famine and all of these things we didn't understand that were incredibly traumatizing. And we othered each other in order to survive. In times of scarcity and in times when there's not enough and in times of threat, most of us go into, like I think all of us, when we're sick and we're down and we feel like we're gonna get fired from our job and all these things, we become our least altruistic versions of ourselves. We become the most selfish. And that's not a bad thing. That's not something wrong with us. That's a survival instinct. Unless we're kind of traumatized and we've been trained that when we're sad and when we're down and when we're sick, if we take care of others, they'll take care of us. Sometimes our trauma can shift us the other way. That like, when we're down, we become people pleasers in order to try to save ourselves. But like I say, like the instinct is to fight for number one. And that's just a pure survival instinct. Like all animals are like that. All insects are like that. And conscious, unconscious, different levels of consciousness, that's the survival instinct. But what's great and special about being a human being is that we're not our instincts. We have higher reasoning, we have higher understanding, we have higher wisdom that can tell us there's better things than just what's instinctual. There's more effective strategies than just what our instincts want us to do. And I think a lot of what we label as evil in our society is just the instinctual part of ourselves. It's that lower consciousness, that lower instinct to just fight for yourself because you want to stay alive. That's what we're looking at, okay? And then a lot of the other things we label as evil are the things that don't serve the current paradigm. Okay, so a lot of religion, a lot of government, a lot of education, a lot of the things that we are trained to believe are bad and evil and wrong with us are coming from that which would have us rise up and oppose the system. So there's a lot of indoctrination there. And then the third thing that we all like to label as evil and wrong and bad in ourselves, yes, are the parts of ourselves that are coping with this system that are horrible. And this is why I say, you know, I don't believe that the people at the top of the system are benefiting as much as they think that they are. Yes, they have all the resources and all the power. And, like I say, I've said it over and over and over again, they're sacrificing their humanity to be there. I do not believe for 1 second that Jeff Bezos or Bill Gates are happy. You can't be. You could not possibly be on this planet and be connected to your humanity and be in that position. To hoard that much for yourself on a planet where we have now the technology and the understanding and the resources to distribute so that no one has to go without, so that we could create situations where there's medicine. And I know that there's politics involved. Again, I understand we can't just benevolent the planet because there are different levels of consciousness on this planet. There are definitely places on this planet where even if we went there and said, here's all the resources or whatever, That's not how that government works. That's not how that religious structure works. These things, like, we have to be respectful of where humanity is at, and where humanity is at a whole bunch of different places. And I think that's the other big main thing that we forget as spiritual people, as empathic people, as people who feel things deeply. We look out at the world, and I've done this, we look out at the world and see people who all see and feel what we see and feel, and are just doing harmful things anyways. And I know that I fall into that a lot. Like, we assume evil. We assume that the people who are in positions of power, that people who are harmful and exploitative and all these things are just evil because they're seeing and feeling and understanding what we're seeing and feeling and understanding, and then being their harmful way anyways. And I don't believe that to be, I don't think that that's the case. We have a large section of humanity that is simply consciously not where we are. They are not feeling what we are feeling. They are not seeing what we are seeing. They genuinely believe that to have more stuff and to be at the top of the ladder and to dominate and to exploit is to win, is to get themselves where they want to go. And they believe that not because they're evil, but because they have a lower level of consciousness than the rest of us. Like, it's literally, they do not understand. Like that quote, "Do not mistake for malice what can easily be understood as ignorance." This is essentially where humanity is at. We as higher level beings tend to be ignorant of where we come from. We are ignorant of what it took to get us here, and why humanity is so traumatized, and why we've been passing on this trauma all throughout our lives. Like, why our grandparents traumatized our parents, traumatized us. Not because they're all evil and horrible, but because they were traumatized, okay? And they were traumatized by humanity that came before them that was traumatized, that had less information, less understanding than they had. That this is how we got here. We got here through trauma. We got here through surviving very, very harsh conditions and creating societies around exploitation and around dominance, because that's how we got ourselves to the point of having enough resources to getting ourselves out of the food chain. That's what we did, just objectively. Again, I'm not making a judgment that that was the only way or that that was the best way, but that is what we did. From our level of understanding, that was what we were probably going to do. Because again, 100 years ago, 200 years ago, people were not as aware as us. Humanity was less aware. It just understood so much less. So it created those systems from misunderstanding. That's how we got here. Humanity faced harshness. Survival was hard. We were low levels of consciousness. We weren't feeling and understanding the greater picture of where all this was going to go. We were just dominating to survive. And like I say, it's the reason we're now so outside of nature to be able to do all of these things and have all of these high ideals for a better world. That's how we got here. So now let's take that and do it. I want that too. Let's heal our trauma. Let's start to understand that dominance and taking over others, it doesn't work. It's not the best way. It's a way. It's created success. But at what cost? And we need to start to understand that those who perpetuate harm are harmed. They have been harmed. Our system is harmful. Because again, it was born from harm. It was born from the harm we were experiencing. People are being harmed. People are lower level intelligence than us. They feel less than us. They understand less than us. And in order to move forward, again, this is why I truly believe that self-love is the way. Because the more we can understand the innocence of how we got here, we can blame ourselves less. This doesn't mean we say, oh, okay, we got here because we were just innocent and didn't understand in low-level consciousness, so it's okay. We don't say that. We say, okay, I get how we got here. It's not because we're evil. It's because we didn't understand. And now that we do understand, we have a responsibility to do better. Having compassion for ourselves, understanding that everyone who is harming someone is doing so because they have been harmed. Right? I believe that there are sociopaths and psychopaths and people who are manipulative and harmful, and I believe they have just been damaged so much that is why they are the way that they are. I don't think that they are inherently evil or actually like fundamentally get pleasure from hurting other people. It is like they are so harmed, they are so hurt, they are so not okay that is how they behave. And again, that is not an excuse and say, well, they're just hurting, so you should expose yourself to them. They're just hurting, so it's okay. Not at all. We're not saying it's okay. We're not saying the damage that is done via that is okay. We are not saying that. We are just saying it's explainable. That is why they are how they are. They are damaged. People have literal brain injuries and they are that way. We are part of evolution. There are humans on this planet that I think that are kind of like a parasite. Like they're literally living a parasite life. They have that level of consciousness. And it's not evil, it's evolution. So let's understand that because we have this higher level awareness, because we have been taken out of nature so much, we have the capacity to create something better. But we are going to have a lot more power if we look at others not as evil and sinful and willfully destructive, but rather look at them as in pain and traumatized and hurt. And what can we do to start to make this world a better place so that less and less and less of us are being harmed and traumatized? More, we can understand ourselves more. We can start to be the difference. We can start to be compassionate with ourselves, stop the war inside of ourselves, right? Because again, all of us fighting this war with parts of ourselves, that's where we start the revolution. If we stop participating in that, this is why this navel gazing stuff isn't not part of it. If we're still at war with ourselves and believing the narrative that there's an evil, inherently evil part of ourselves, we are going to be susceptible to continuing the battle and the fight and the evil thing out there, which is just perpetuating harm. The more we get on our own sides and see our own innocence, again, it doesn't make our harmful behavior okay. It doesn't erase our harmful behavior. It gives us the opportunity to understand it so that we can grow into something more mature. And that is what we want to see as a humanity. We don't want to see a getting rid of the evil people, because there are no evil people. We want to see a maturation of the immature ways we are living right now. And that is going to come from love and grace and understanding, and then a calling higher. We have to say, this is what is harmful. This is why it doesn't work. Here is the better way. We need to demand that better way. It's not because you're evil. It's not because you're wrong and bad. It's because I can see how we got here. I can see how we got to the billionaire class. I can see why they are exploited the way that they are. Doesn't make it okay. Doesn't mean I want it to continue. Not at all. It doesn't work. But what are we going to do different? We're going to mature. We're going to say, we don't need to all hoard so much for ourselves and have so much fear, right? Because like, why do people hoard? We hoard because we're afraid we're not going to have enough. Okay, but if we had a system that inherently took care of one another, we wouldn't be so afraid for ourselves, because we would know that the system has some safety nets. And that's part of, like, hello, we have the resources, we have the technology, we have the understanding to create a system where we take care of each other. We've manufactured ourselves out of insecurity. But now we're hoarding as though we still have that insecurity. And that's where we just need to say, okay, this is immature now. We've evolved beyond that. We don't need to hoard anymore in order for society to continue forward. And in fact, the more we redistribute, the more society is going to go forward. That's what we're calling for. So it's not we're evil. It's that we're traumatized, we got here from trauma, so what are we going to do about it? We're going to call for better ways, starting with ourselves, and then in our work in the world. We're going to start to be less hostile. We're going to start to be less seeing others as other. We're going to include more and more and more people in us to create more and more opportunity for everyone to have enough through our technology and resources. And that's how we're going to get there. But so this is why humanity is so harsh and why consensus reality is so harsh. Because we've been traumatized and we were immature and we didn't understand. And this is how we got here. So what are we going to do about it? Okay? So if anyone has any questions before I close down for the day. But yeah, like I don't see us as evil. I think it's completely reasonable that we got here. Humanity, nature was very, very harsh for us. Getting here was really, really hard. We hoarded for a reason. So now we can start to do better because we understand more. We have the technology. We have the understanding. We don't have to keep doing what we're doing. We can call for a maturation. Right? We didn't understand before. We do understand now. We're really getting it now. And it's not because we're evil. It's because we were totally not understanding. Okay. Have a great rest of your day, night, week, and I will see you when I see you.